Coming at you from Palette here in Saratoga, and we are here to celebrate Women's Equality Day. I'm Marna Redding, and I am with the Capital Region Chamber as my day job, and my side hustle is I am a life coach for the Faster Way to Fat Loss, and so I'm happy to be here today as a moderator for this amazing panel called Women in Motion. This panel is packed with all-stars to talk a little bit about sports and athletics and how they are a link to success and confidence for women in business and life. So before I get started, I'm just going to ask everyone to quickly introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Tova.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tova Liskey. I am the president for Junior Achievement of Northeastern New York, but I am a 3-time All-American college athlete in the Hall of Fame at the University at Albany. At JA, we empower students to succeed in life in general, whether that's athletics or not, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we have our discussion today.
Hi, my name is Lisa DeLugo, and I am a certified running coach, a podcaster, and a life coach, and I am the founder and owner of Ella Go, which is all about empowering women through fitness, health, and everything in between.
Thanks. My name is Anna Lalaway, and my day job is as an environmental consultant for a company called Arcadis. So I'm a geologist, and I've worked in the Arctic and the Antarctic on climate change research for about a decade in academia. And my side hustle is that I started a nonprofit called Saratoga Shredders, which is a girls' mountain bike club based here in Saratoga. So we have about 170 girls aged 5 to 12, in addition to about 50 volunteer female mentors that ride mountain bikes in 3 different venues in this area in the fall and the spring. So we like to empower our girls locally by getting them on bikes and into the woods.
And so while I'm not an athlete, maybe I've played one on TV. No, but I'm raising athletes. So I'm super excited to be here and to have this conversation with all of you. So Anna, let's start with you, because I think, kind of jumping out there and creating something that you have a passion for. How did you know that you would find other women and other girls with that passion here in Saratoga?
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't really. I spent a good amount of time, probably 4 years or so, racing competitively mountain biking when my girls were quite small. I have 2 daughters. And then when I decided to go back to work full time, I pulled back from the training and the racing and decided to do something for my own girls and start this little club. And we started out quite small. And I just had the girls, we printed out these little business card size pieces of paper for them to hand out to their friends in school, and said we're meeting at the park at 4 o'clock every afternoon on a Friday. And we were small, we were 15, 20 girls. And then when COVID happened, we didn't start again until last spring. And there were 40, 50 girls that showed up to the first practice. And I was like, okay, this is a thing. And obviously during COVID, there were only certain activities that we could do, and being on a bicycle, as long as the girls were staying on their bikes, they were socially distant from each other. And so it was a safe activity that parents were comfortable doing with their kids. And I didn't know what would happen with it at all. I thought it would stay pretty small, and especially as sports started opening up again now. But we have, clearly there's the interest, and for girls to be on mountain bikes, and for it to stay as a girls only club too. And we haven't had any pushback on, why don't we have, if someone wants to start a boys, club for mountain biking, that's fantastic, like go for it. But what I started is for girls only. And through that have also increased the amount of women on mountain bikes, which I wasn't really thinking of with this, but we now have a group of 50, 60 women that ride, women's only rides, even without the girls sometimes. And we do mentor only rides with them. So, I think it's kind of here to stay now, which is nice. And mountain biking and the previous sport that I did, also ultimate frisbee, are both very fringe sports. But now it seems like mountain biking is almost kind of one of those mainstream sports that parents come along and drop their kids off for shredders practice and that sort of thing. So I've always come from more of a fringe sport background, and I don't have any intention of making mountain biking mainstream, because I love that it has that fringe aspect to it and isn't mainstream. But at the same time, to have the acceptance of our community of getting excited to get these girls on bikes has been fantastic.
talking about the fringe, Lisa, I'm going to come to you next. So you consider yourself a non-traditional athlete. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and why you label yourself that way?
Yeah, so I asked her to ask me this because I think it's important because I'm not your typical athlete. I don't look like your typical athlete. I'm 47. I didn't start, becoming an athlete until late into my 30s. As I was younger, of course I was, involved in sports and things like that, but I didn't feel like I looked the part. And I think that's one of the things I think we need to start breaking this mindset of what an athletic woman looks like. It can look like anyone. It can look like any age, any size. So that's why I consider myself a non-traditional athlete. And I'll never forget the day I went to a physical therapist, and I remember her saying to me, well, because you're an athlete. I said, what? Wait, hold on. What did you just say? She goes, well, you're an athlete. I was like, oh my God, she just said that? Like, I did not believe that I was an athlete. And here I am running half marathons and 5Ks. And I'm just like, and I'm in my late 30s at the time. And I'm just like, my gosh, I'm an athlete? Oh my God, I'm an athlete. So, I wanted her to ask me this question because I think there's a lot of women out there that think what an athlete looks like is not, it's not what you think. It could be anything. And I want you to believe that if someone like me can do it, anybody can do it. So I think that's just important to talk about today.
Leave it to those physical therapists. They're the best. They'll always just tell us like it is. So Tova, amazing accomplishments here in New Albany as a student athlete for sure. Tell us a little bit about that experience and particularly how it impacted you and who you are today.
So I tell this story all the time in my professional world and what I do for a living. As a young child, unlike you, Lisa, I considered myself an athlete. I played 3 sports all through high school. It was almost my way of going to college is I was going to be an athlete. I was a first-time college student, first generation in my family, I should say. And I got to school, and that's what I did. I played field hockey. And my coach said to me at one point, she's like, honey, you have to pick a major. I said, I have to do what? I have to decide what I want to do for the rest of my life. I play field hockey. And so, I looked back at the courses that I was taking, what did I like, and I chose a major. I graduated from college, and I said, well, I guess I'll coach field hockey if I can't continue to play it as a professional athlete. So I went and coached, and I coached for a year at Hamilton College, field hockey and lacrosse. And I got through that year and was like, oh gosh, hell no, this is not what I want to do for a living. Came back to the Albany area, and that's where I found Junior Achievement. And Junior Achievement was all about empowering students to succeed in life. And I fell in love with that mission because all along I thought I was just going to be an athlete. And the reality is it's less than 2% of any athlete, female or male, that actually make money playing the sport. And so, the lesson is so many life characteristics and leadership skills can be transferable into the business world from being an athlete. But most athletes are going to have that full day job, right? And like you had mentioned. And so, that was my story as an athlete and where I am today and why I'm so passionate about Junior Achievement.
Thank you for that. Like I said, I mentioned I'm raising athletes. My son is a hockey goalie, so that's a lot. And he really thinks he's going to play in the NHL. And I am a very supportive mom. So obviously, Jack, you're going to rock it and go play for the Capitals. And then I always say to him, what's your side job going to be? And he goes, I'm going to go into communications and I'm going to be a sports broadcaster. I'm like, perfect. That's a great plan B, buddy. Great plan. So plan Bs are really important. But let's keep that conversation going about representation of women in pro sports, right? So I'm going to have all of you answer this question. Lisa, I'll start with you. So good thinking. So tell us a little bit about, as you watch, or, even since the Olympics just happened, tell us a little bit about your thoughts about women in pro sports and perhaps the lack of opportunity that exists compared to our male counterparts.
We ain't there. I mean, we're not there. We're not there. And I think a lot has to do with this foundation of women coming together, because even within women, we're not even accepting of different types of athlete or athleticism within the women, tribe. So I think that we're not even halfway there. We're not even a third there. And, when I look at sports with women, it's still that mindset of what they look like. It's still that mindset, what she looks like. It's not about her performance. It's not about how good she runs or how good she skates or whatever, as rough as she can be and, tough she is on the field. It's still about what she looks like. And we need to stop that. We need to stop this whole mindset of, what an athletic woman looks like. Let's talk about how she performs. When you see a man, and I'm not male bashing, but when you see men in sports, it's about their performance. No one talks about what they look like. It's always about what the woman looks like. So, going back to your question and looking at the Olympics, first of all, I'm so proud of the women. My God, I watch them and I can't tell you how many times I cried. These women are badasses. They're amazing. And for my daughter to see that, it's just, it shows to her how much we can do. But like I said, we're not there. We got a lot of work to do, but at least we're doing the work.
Very well said, Lisa. Yeah, we're certainly not there. And, I can only speak personally to the sports I've been involved in, which were ultimate frisbee and mountain biking. And with ultimate frisbee, we won the national championships in college here in the U.S. And then I went to Cambridge in England to do my PhD. And during that time, I played for the women's national team, and we traveled around the world playing ultimate frisbee. But when I first arrived in Cambridge, there were no women playing ultimate at Cambridge. And so a group of 10 to 15 of us across the whole of the UK would get together every once in a while and play tournaments in Europe, and just so that we could play a bit. But what I did was I coached the boys in Cambridge, the college, and back to the sport and build it. And then after 8 years, there were 30 women's teams in the country playing, and the level of the sport had built up pretty high at that point. So it was really nice to be involved in the building, the very tangible building of the women's sport in that country, right? Where it's a different culture a little bit. With mountain biking, there aren't women out there racing. So for the racing scene, I raced at an elite level for quite a few years, and there would be 3 or 4 of us on the line at the same time for a New York State mountain bike championships, which is ridiculous, right? There's a field of, 50, 100 guys, and then there's 3 or 4 of us women at an elite level racing. So that's not acceptable, right? And for racing. And so Shredders is just about getting girls on bikes. We're not about racing. But if even 1 or 2 of those 170 girls decide to race, that's great. There'll be more women at the start line. We've had this really nice opportunity where through my racing, I've had some contacts with the pro mountain bike race community. So this past winter, we had weekly Zoom calls with professional mountain bike women every single week. So we had the current world champion, a US woman called Kate Courtney. We had 4 different Olympians, 2 of which were medalists, 2 of which went to the Olympics this summer, and they spoke to the girls live on Zoom every week. So our little Shredders, who were between 5 and 12 years old, got to speak to these literally world champions, national champions, Olympic bronze medalists, and ask them questions about how they got to where they are. And because 1 or 2 of them said yes, these pros and athletes, then more and more of them started saying yes, right? Because they were seeing these little girls get so excited about it. And so we'd have like 50, 60 girls from Saratoga listening in on these calls. And so to hear these women want to be excited about talking to the girls and lifting them up so that they were very candid and transparent about, like, I'm not trying to get you to be a professional mountain bike racer. This is just what I've done. And I really want you to just enjoy being out there and doing the sport that you love doing and making it sustainable so that you enjoy playing with your friends, being in the woods, riding your bikes with your friends. And that's what we talked about. Like, you're not going to be able to play field hockey for the rest of your life, for example, or play ultimate frisbee for the rest of your life. Like, your body can't sustain that. And might not have the time to be a professional athlete. But if you can do that sport that you love outside with your friends, that's the way to do it. Totally forget what the question was. Professional sports. Yeah, so it's nice to hear from the pros and the representation there. And that's great.
to add a couple things to both of your comments. And, a funny story, Lisa, I totally agree with you about the way an athlete is supposed to look and that whole stereotype on that. When I started my college career, my coach called me into her office, and I go and I sit down, and she's like, we've got to order you some good sports bras. And I go, excuse me? I was mortified. I was like, what? She's like, we have to get you some good sports bras. And I was like, oh my gosh, why was I mortified? Why was I mortified? Was I, thinking that I needed to have this certain body shape and size in order to be that good athlete? And thinking back on my 18-year-old self, that's exactly how I felt. And so, really feeling your, comments on that stereotype and how an athlete should feel. Building on you, Anna, I feel like society has this stigma on women that you have to have children by a certain age, and you need to be married by a certain age, and you need to have a successful career, and you need to be part of the PTA, and you need to bring your kids to everything, and you need to cook dinner every night, and we cannot do it all. And I think sometimes when you look at putting athletics into, a professional career, or even carrying on that fitness or, that lifestyle, it's draining when you think about having to do it all. And it's important though. Like, it's important for me, at least, to continue to be physically active, and where I'm not a professional athlete, start my day every day at 6 a.m. at the gym, get that, sweat out, feel good and empowered about myself to, actually be in my professional world.
Kind of great segue into this next conversation that I'd like to have with all of you about the barriers that sometimes I think we create for ourselves, right? Especially as women. To Tova's comments, why do we put all that pressure on ourselves to be the best mom, to be the best person in the office, to be the first person at the gym in the morning, perhaps? Where does that come from, right? Like, let's talk a little bit about the barriers or those things that we put on ourselves. And, why do we think we do that? So, for example, I am super type A personality. Perhaps that's why Marcella asked me to moderate this today. But I'm super type A, and I know that about myself. It's taken me probably 43 years to get to that point. But I have high expectations for myself and my kids. And on vacation this past week, my mom, love you, Betty, came with us. And the second day of vacation, she said to me, this is not a vacation. You're insane. What are you doing? You're like up making breakfast, getting everyone packed, so we're at the beach by 9 o'clock, And I smiled at her and said, I'm so glad I invited you to come on this vacation. But you're right, it's a trip, Mom, it's a trip. But that point that she made to me resonated because my children are 7 and 11, and I'm never going to get that time back with them. But I do it to myself. No one else says to me, Myrna, everything has to be perfect for them, so that's your job. And oh yeah, you have a job during the day too that you're responsible for, and you still want to get them to where they need to be. So let's have that conversation. Where do you guys think that stress comes from? And, as it relates to athletics, if our children or people in our families that we're responsible for want to do those things outside of school, how do we support them to do that? Who wants to go first?
So I have boys, not girls, but the same goes for it. When I think part of our barrier as, that running around, when I didn't start playing sports until I was 9. And there was one thing for me to do. It was Little League softball. There was nothing else. I grew up in a rural town, so maybe that was part of the issue. Now you can mountain bike, you can play field hockey, you can play ultimate frisbee, you can play softball, you can play soccer, you can play lacrosse. Heck, girls can play flag football. Hallelujah, go girls. I love that. There is every single sport and opportunity for kids to play starting at 3 years old. And it's not even by season anymore. It's all year long. Traditional season, off season, travel, over, the winter. And so I think we have that need or that feeling sometimes to make sure that we're giving our kids every single opportunity to do it all. And it's hard. And I think it's hard for kids too to in this day, they have to almost specialize and say, I'm going to choose one. And as an athlete that played multiple sports, I think that was important. But today there is so much for kids to do that we feel like we have to do it all. And, your mom, Betty's kind of right a little bit. I mean, sometimes sitting down on the couch and just cuddling beats running out to, that lacrosse practice. So.
Okay, so what I didn't tell you all that I have a master's degree in psychology. So with that being said, I'm gonna bring it. The problem is that this is the narrative that we tell ourselves since the day we came onto this earth. Sorry, mom and dad, you were part of this. You're part of the problem. Society's part of the problem. And it's this thing that we have to do it all, and we don't. It's this thing where we have to, just like you said, I have to cook. Why do we have to do that? Like, why do we have to do that? So going back to sports and the opportunities that are out there, I'm a single mom, and my daughter knows, and my mother argues with me on this all the time. I let my daughter know she can be whatever the hell she wants to be. Okay. She doesn't need to conform. She sees me now. She knows that she could be an entrepreneur. My goodness. Was anyone ever told when they were a kid that they could be an entrepreneur as a woman, own your own business? Like, you don't need to go to college if you don't want to. And I tell her that. I tell her that she can do any sports that she wants. It's whatever she wants. Now, with that being said, she's going to have a hard time because then society is going to be coming in and telling her, who do you think you are? But the thing I can give her is her voice and the strength that she has to stand up for herself. So, it's the narrative that we tell each other. And, I still deal with it. I still fall into that trap. But then I learn to bounce up and say, what am I doing here? And you're so right. I do that. And I'm like, what the heck? This is not a vacation. I don't need to do everything. Hey, the dishes can pile up. Okay. So I think with that being said, that's really what I feel. It's the narrative that we it's been ingrained in us since the day we came into this planet.
Yeah, you both said everything. That was great. Same thing, and I'm also a single mom, and I hear from my children that we just don't do anything. At my dad's house, it's great. We just relax, and and at my house, I'm constantly, scheduling things and doing adventure after adventure after adventure. And that's kind of who I am in a way, but I also need to realize that I do need to step back sometimes. Like, it's okay to just not do nothing for the occasional day, for sure. And I wanted to bring it into business a little bit too, because I just had a conversation with colleagues yesterday about, I do think that we have made some progress. And as you were saying, Tova, that there are so many sports now available to girls. And I think with science too, being a scientist myself and bringing STEM with junior achievements too, bringing STEM into schools and to all children. My company tries to do this as well across the board. And I think those opportunities are out there now, but of course we still have a long ways to go. But in talking to my colleagues, we were talking about how back when there weren't that many female engineers in consulting, for example, it was very competitive and you were in competition with the only other woman in the room, for example. And now we have shifted a little bit in that we are lifting each other up as a group and as a community of women, I feel like, and definitely not across the board. And obviously there's work to be done, but I do think there is that positive shift where we used to be, and I wasn't in the industry at the time, but hearing these women speak about 10, 15 years ago when there were these one or two managers in the room at the time, it was, you couldn't lift each other up because there was that competition there. And now we really all support each other within, as engineers and scientists within the business, and see each other and back each other up from a business perspective. So certainly there are still barriers, but it's good to see some progress anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting to that point. In one of my meetings this week with one of our members from the chamber, they were telling us that, I guess, I don't know the statistics specifically, so I'm just going to generalize a little bit. You can Google it. But I think, the candidates for MBAs are so much more men, perhaps 70% of a class is typically male. And one of our members was saying how 62% of their actual current MBA class is all women. And so they are so excited and trying to tell that story now. And I didn't think about that in terms of the representation of women as it relates to the next degree, like a graduate level degree. But you're so right. It is definitely in our lifetime, let's hope, and certainly our children's lifetimes that we see that, grow considerably. So a little bit more of a personal question, put you guys on the spot a little bit. So if you think about a failure that you've had in your life, how did you coach yourself through that? And if you're willing to share, or were you able to coach perhaps a student through a failure or a client through a failure? However you want to take that, but talk to us a little bit about, your ability to coach yourself through failure or a student, client, however that might work for you, and perhaps your role as an athlete in that.
I first just want to note that Catherine was not kidding. This came from Paint Sip. This microphone.
You're like, I know, all you can look at is that.
Oh, gosh. So I want to answer that question really, and it's not really so much a story of failure, but really using, there's an old saying that is something like overnight success came from 10 years of investment. And, I think back about my career, and I played a sport for 10 years before I really had that true, success at that. I just started playing golf last year, and people were saying to me, okay, you're an athlete, you got that swing, that's that natural swing. I just played last night and I stunk for the first 3 holes. I stunk. And people are like, you need to play more and talk about, the whole role or the stress, we put on ourselves as women. I said, the last time I played or was good at a sport, I practiced 3 hours a day, played 2 games a week. Who has that time anymore? But, my answer to that is just, you don't have to be the best at everything on day one. Sometimes the minute someone feels they're not good at something or they're not, immediate success, that it's not for them, or, they need to give up. And, so it's not so much really a story about failure, but just the story about being persistent and continuing and working on yourself, because it's not necessarily always going to happen overnight. It's years of investment in yourself and in your passion and what it is that you're doing.
Okay, so I'm a running coach, so of course I coach women who are first-time runners, and the first thing I tell them is there's going to be days that you're going to suck, okay? You're going to fail, and the reason being is that this is a lifestyle. Life sometimes sucks. It's not always perfect, and the most important part about this is that can you learn from it? Can you learn from because you went too fast, like a lot of beginners like to do, run too fast too soon? That's how you learn. That's how you grow. How do you think you grow? You have to fall down a couple of times. But the best part is if you can fall differently. Like, you failed, you did that one failure and it looked like this. But this time it looked different because you learned, you grew. So as far as, me coaching these women, it's trying to change the mindset that this is a lifestyle. This is, you're gonna fail. And I hate using that F word. There's other F words that I like to use, but that's the F word I don't like to use. But you're gonna learn, and that's how you grow. And once they figure that out, when they have their days where they text me in the middle of the night and said, that sucked. I said, that's okay. And then the next day they're like, oh my God, I just did 4 miles. That's amazing, because that's just part of the process of life. And once they have that mind shift that this is going to be some lows and highs through this journey of being a runner, then they're going to be okay with those lows and be like, you know what, tomorrow's another day. So that's kind of how I coach my women in running and accepting failure.
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, failing and falling are a very tangible, real thing in the sport of mountain biking on a daily ride basis. So that's why I wear pants most of the time, because I have bruises all over me. But so for the girls and shredders, this is a very, a daily, every practice we talk about this, and whether it's looking at a feature, so a log that they're trying to roll over, some roots that are in their way. Those are tangible. Yes, those are rocks and roots, and those are barriers and obstacles, and that's directly transferable to life, right? If they can look at that barrier, an obstacle, stare it in the face, and be like, "I'm going to conquer that," and do it, like that feeling of accomplishment is incredible. And of course, they only think of it as having gotten over that particular rock and root. But we, as the mentors, are like, "Oh, that's going to mean that when she goes into school and doesn't do well in class, she's going to be able to conquer that barrier and that obstacle." And so those are really, real transferable skills there. And as you say, it's one of those life lessons, and the girls are learning those on a daily basis. But if we can be there as a group for them, right? If they're going with their brother or their parents, or even their mom and their parents at home, it's one thing to have that peer pressure from their own family members. But if they're surrounded by their peers, both in the same age group but also with the same ability group, we're not putting beginners with advanced kids, even if they're the same age. We're putting young beginners together, older beginners together, young intermediates together, older intermediates together. They're feeling comfortable, and it's that healthy peer pressure that we're offering them the chance to ride over that, but they absolutely aren't forced to do so. But then when they are able to do it, it's this huge sense of accomplishment. So yeah, it's a very, very real thing as failure in mountain biking, but it's nice to be able to achieve that.
So just to kind of bring it home and close us for today, I think let's each share something that, you've taken from your experience as an athlete or within your experience as a coach, and something that you try to do every day to live that. So, for example, I told you that I have a side hustle and I'm a coach. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned in that role for me personally, especially at this point and stage in my career and my life, I find value in being with other like-minded women. And I think it's really hard to find those women at times. Part of the reason why I joined Palette, right? Shout out to Catherine, because I really believe that I couldn't find people like myself without joining something like Palette, who introduced me to so many women I would never have met before. And so for me, I've realized getting up every day on a very set schedule, working out, and tag teaming one of my friends who I've met through this group, that's kind of my day, right? That's how I'm doing something first for myself before the rugrats get up and I get them fed and I get them wherever they're going. And for me, school starts on Wednesday. So they only have 4 more days and I'm so excited about that. All about routine. So for me, and I never really thought that I never considered myself an athlete. I played sports growing up, but I went to a private school and everyone had to because that was it and everyone could play. So now at this point in my life, I do consider myself an athlete, and I have found those other women that also are doing that, and I check in with them every day. And that's kind of how I'm centering myself to take on each of my days. So what about all of you? You don't have to go first.
Okay, Lisa, you can go first. I feel like because you're sitting next to the moderator, you always got to go first.
Actually, here's the question.
Yeah, so what do you do every day, and how, that mindset that you might have or that mantra that you live by as it relates to athletics in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So athletics has always been it's always been part of my life, and I've actually shifted. This is the least fit I've ever been in my life. And for me, I had to come to terms with that. Like, I've always been an elite athlete of some sort, whether that was, yes, they're fringe sports, but elite athletes at the level of that particular sport. And now going back to work as a single mom and not having the time to be an elite athlete and train, I have to be okay with the fact that I'm more of a weekend warrior and that my time on the bike is spent with 7-year-old girls instead of, and often with other women too, which is fantastic. So yeah, my routine is very different than it has been. And I think I've really learned to accept that, which has been great. Like, I'm okay with not being in the fittest shape of my life because I'm now engaging my science brain and so it's the sports and business side of things that I've loved to re-engage now. So it's using the background of my sports bring into business a successful athlete to be brought into the business world and to carry that through life. So that's really what I've brought from sports just now.
So, I said at the beginning, I said mind, body, and soul. I that's how I coach the women, empowering them through mind, body, and soul. And the whole idea of running is a form of self-care. You're moving. And when you have stress, it moves throughout your body. Running came to me when I needed it for my mental health. I didn't do it for weight loss or trying to be fit. I needed it because I needed an outlet. I was like just dying to just like word vomit, right? And running became that for me. It became my self-care. And some of the things that I coach the women is that this is your time to focus on yourself. And there's a bee that I don't really like. And of course, it's focusing on me. I hope it doesn't attack me. But anyways, but with that being said, it's the focus on yourself, taking that time out. Listen, my mom thought I was crazy when I asked her to come to watch my daughter so I can do like 4 miles outside. She's like, well, why can't you just wait until she goes to bed? Because I'm a morning runner, Mom. Okay, I need to get this out because if I don't get it out, I'm not going to be a good mom. I'm not going to be a good at work. I need to release this. She still thinks I'm crazy, but this is my self-care. And this is something that is part of my life. It's not going anywhere because I need it for my mental health. So that is what, and of course, running became something much more than that. But initially, it really was a form of self-care that I practice as every day if I can.
I echo that, Lisa. Start the day every day for my own self-care. But I feel like I had a lot more pressure on myself when I wasn't an actual athlete, when I feel like it was, it mattered with stats and, wins, losses, letting down my team. Now as an adult, I've learned to let some of that go. Like if I forget to wear this, like the workout actually still did happen.
Don't close your ring.
Right? I can go throughout the day without closing my rings, but what does anybody actually do with the data, right? I'm like, okay, do I really add my calories burned, throughout the week? So obviously I've learned to let a lot go, but I truly believe that a lot of the skills that I feel like I've developed and characteristics I've developed as an athlete move forward into the business world. Talk about, stress relief. Stress can be debilitating to people, like physically can shut down. And that's my relief too in the morning, getting that all out, focusing on, the day ahead. I have a friend that always says, sweat before screens. And you think about that when you get up and the first thing you do is go onto your email or social media, your whole mindset is completely different than you get up, you're focusing, on yourself and that hour, that you give to yourself during the day. Stress relief, leadership, goal setting. What are some other, kind of transferable skills that really have led over for me as an athlete? But I will say, and I think this is important to say, I have 2 rock star female employees, team members of mine that never were athletes. So it's not that, if you're not an athlete, you cannot be a rock star because, they are certainly out there, but there's definitely those skills that, I've developed as an athlete that have turned over into the business world.
Well, thanks so much for joining us this morning for our first panel to kick off our Equality Day. I'm going to pass the mic. No, I'm not. Just kidding. You're going to hear from them later on today. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks to all of you for being part of the panel today. And have a great day.